Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is the Book of Meeple, a show where I devote my time to raving and ranting about board games, but let's be honest, it's usually more the ranty part. This is going to be a fairly quick video of Beyond the Base Game where I'm basically talking about the Unconscious Mind modules and expansions that you can get. Most of these were available via the Kickstarter, so I presume that when it gets to retail you're going to be able to buy these separately, but if you got the Kickstarter like all in or deluxe pledge and that, you would probably be able to get these thrown in. Some of them were stretch goals, some of them were just specific pledge level ones. And I've basically gone through them all, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown as to what they do and whether I think they're worth it. There won't be a great deal number of pictures for this one, but you're basically going to get my explanations. So we're going to start with the main event, I think, so far, which is the Nightmares expansion. So this one is a small expansion. It introduces two modules, the Pets module and the Madness module. So the Pets module is basically these four cats.
I think not, baby puppy.
The idea is with this is that you essentially have a separate track for your emotional support pet, and it can be combined with the Madness side or the normal side. But what happens is when you do your ink pot movement at the end of a round, end of a turn, you can basically spend some of that movement instead to move up here. You can cash it in for the bonus, which can be pretty sizable bonuses, and you bring it back down and then you move it back up again. This is a very simple module to throw in, and you could even throw it into a new player, frankly, but the module does one thing that I'm not a fan of. I like the idea that on your board you have this tricksy mechanic with the ink pot where you need to think, right, this is the action I want to do, but it doesn't move the ink pot as far as I want to. Maybe I should go to the space above it and do that. You can get around it, but there's still an element of tactical play there. If you throw in pets, you effectively remove all tension of that. Because if I can simply just go, well, I don't want to move 4 spaces on this thing. Oh, well, that's fine. I'll just give 2 to my pet. Yay, I land on the best space that I can and everything. It feels like you're playing Unconscious Mind on easy mode at that point, which I don't particularly want to do. I feel like the base game as it is just fine with its difficulty level and for its complexity. But even though it could have used a little streamlining here and there, check out the review. But Pets kind of just makes it too easy. You can just pretty much get the best location for your ink pot every single time, pretty much without fail. And the bonus you get from here can certainly supercharge the game in some way, because getting heart-shaped containers or extra treats, on a whim is pretty powerful stuff. So it's a fine module. It's easy enough to throw in. It's really going to be a case of, do you want easy mode or not? I personally don't, so it's not one I'll really use. But if easy mode, if you want to make it a little bit more flexible, a bit more easier for new players to get their stuff done, then by all means throw it in, whether you're using Madness or not. Alright, so the Madness module, this is the big expansion now. Although I say big, it's not huge, but it does introduce more bits in general. So there's quite a few bits here that I'm going to collect as such, because it sort of comes in multiple parts. But predominantly it revolves around a new resource called Madness. Now, this is not Cthulhu Madness type thing. It's just general madness of nightmares and dreams. And thematically, it's a pretty good fit for this game. The idea of psychotherapy dealing with, horrible night terrors and stuff. That's pretty cool. But mainly it's just an aesthetics perspective. The idea is that you now have this cracked insight dial, which functions like a normal insight dial, but now you can put, I'll just use one of the special beads for illustration, but as well as putting them on the minor, medium, and major, you can also put them into these cracked sections on your dial, which hold more insights, but then they give you Madness tokens. The idea is that Madness tokens, as the game progresses, can get you various bonuses as you level through. So if you've got at least 8 or more Madness tokens, you can freely transfer a median insight, pretty powerful. If you've got 3 or more, you can move an extra couple of spaces counterclockwise on the map rather than clockwise. So it gives you some cool benefit while you're mad. The problem is, as soon as somebody gets to 13 Madness, or as soon as the reputation marker passes a certain point, and I think there's one other area, I can't remember the third trigger off the top of my head, but basically 3 triggers in the game are going to cause you to take a Madness check, which means that whoever's got whatever Madness level you have, you essentially lose that many VP. And you can even put it on 2 VP per Madness point. That's quite damaging to lose a good chunk of VP, although it depends how often you're using it. I mean, if you're losing 3 or 4, whoop-de-doo, but if you're losing 12 or 13, that's quite a sizable chunk. And bear in mind, that's happening 3 times in the game, so that could be a sizable amount of VP you lose if you happen to go down this Madness route. But You know, other than that, mainly it just revolves around a few tweaks to some other rules. So, for example, you now have another journal that you can produce, the Book of the Dead, which, you know, based on madness. You've got another location goal, again, based on madness. You've got, you know, some a resource called Dark Insight, which is basically black beads, or navy beads, it seems. And these can come from, you know, different research cards that are grey volumes, which basically give you madness and some of those insights now and again. You've also got a few uncanny clients, which are just basically some more routine clients that you throw into the mix, and they can get you these dark insights as well. But the predominant use of the dark insights is via these. So you've got a few more grief layers, and you've got a few more dream cards to do. And the dream cards can let you spend dark insights in order to generate the catharsis effect, so you can get like a pretty sizable bonus from these things. And the uncanny clients that you have when you get these end up with these metamorphosis layers on them, which is basically the idea that it's not so much a Rorschach painting, it's more that your person is transforming into something horrific. And yeah, horrific is the word I'd use. There is some serious nightmare fuel in these images. I mean, this definitely fits the theme of nightmares. So much so, there are 2 cards that I effectively ban from this set. If you are like me and arachnophobic, there is a grief layer and a card in here that you must ban from the game. You know, the grief layer has somebody like metamorphosing into a spider, so it's got the spider face with, you know, fangs and hair and that. That's nightmare fuel in itself. There is also a card in here. I'm not going to show either of them, don't worry. But basically, there is a card in here that basically has a giant walking spider on the horizon or something. Like, I mean, a big one. Best way I could describe it, think the old Giant Spider B movies. Or if you've ever played a computer game called Limbo. Remember the spider that appears at the left-hand side of the screen and that? Yeah, think that. It's basically like that. It is terrifying if you're arachnophobic to see those too. So you have to hide them out of the game if you don't want to scare yourself rigid. And finally, for the Nightmares one, you've got an extra module called the Gramophone. And this one is a module I will refuse to use point blank. It's a small module, very easy rules. All it is that you give up a madness token or a heart-shaped container and you grab this. This allows you to do 1 extra action for all the stuff that's limited. So you could do 3 main actions rather than just 2 if you put 2 ideas down, or you could do 6 location actions if you have the tags rather than just 5. I will never use this module again. The problem with this one is that it's basically just adds more downtime, more length to the game without actually, you know, being worth it. Because there's already a lot of downtime between turns, particularly in a 4-player game when people are triggering just 1 action, let alone 2, let alone friggin' 3. When you've got somebody causing God knows how many triggers with 3 of these on their turn, you know, particularly if they're doing like 3 location moves or 3, you know, notebook tile gains or something like that, or 3 sets of publishing cards and, you know, like playing cards and publishing journals, 3 of those in quick succession, the turns just take forever, and there's just too much going on as you watch somebody struggle to try and deal with all the triggers that are going on. It's too much. There is plenty enough triggers and combos and that in the base game. This basically just turns like the fiddliness level up to 11 and just makes the downtime worse, and in some cases the length longer as a result. The amount of people that might have to take backseas because they've messed up part of their thing, and it's very difficult to do with 2 actions, let alone 3. Don't bother with this module.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
So overall, the Madness expansion just feels a bit like a letdown. It's there, but the Pets module makes the game too easy for me, but I could probably see it being the best part of the expansion for some. You know, the Gramophone I will never use, even though it's a very tiny element, and this whole Madness scene is just not necessary. It works, but the rules layers on top aren't enough. The rules layers are too much to warrant any extra enjoyment, because there's not a huge amount of extra enjoyment. The Madness stuff is basically a few bonuses and some slight variety in the cards. And it's like, I would have simply just taken more variety in the dreams and the clients and all that, but using base game elements. Why do we need to throw in an entirely new mechanic to make some of this little bit of extra variety work? It's not like you get tons. I mean, you only get, you know, this many extra grief layers, you only get this many new clients, you get a decent amount of dreams, but that's about it. So, yeah, I mean, you get 1 more journal, that's it. 1 more journal? Really? You couldn't like do more? 1 more location goal? I feel like you could have expanded this one a bit. Well, I'm saying that if you're going to make this expansion with a new mechanic, then add more variety with it. But failing that, Don't give me a whole new mechanic before you've even let the base game settle in our minds. You could have released this a year later and it would have been fine. But now, with the base game as complex as it is, you don't need this. It's a 5 out of 10 for me. It's average at best. You know, you get some fun out of it. You get a little bit from the pets module more, and I can see the pets module being good for some, particularly new players. But the gramophone, no way. And the madness stuff, it's just not necessary. I will play the game if somebody throws it in. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm pretty much just going to let this sit and take up space in a box and never really take it out myself.
Now what do you think?
Now we get on to the free association modules. This is basically like a collection of mini modules that are very easy to throw into the game. They don't add a lot of rules. The question is, do they add enough impact, or do they unbalance things in some ways in order to make the game worse? So let's see what each of these do. So first up, you have the Illusion Dream cards. This is literally just 6 dream cards, hollow foil, so they look really nice, really cool pictures, you know, one with a big lobster on a plate, you know, stuff like that. But basically, these are just shuffled into the main deck, and what they do is the same thing. They require a collection of identical insights as well as a, you know, crap ton of coffee to basically do 2 things. Trigger the reputation track and move the hearts as far as necessary to cure the client. These are far too powerful.
It's over 9,000!
They really are too powerful. If I see one of these in the mix, I'm grabbing it literally off the get-go, because automatically curing a client that is worth 6, 7, 8 points is pretty powerful in itself. But then on top of that, you know, the idea of all you need is, I mean, in this case, what do I need? I need 2 identical median insights and 4 coffee. Coffee is not that hard to get hold of in this game. It's a pretty easy resource to get a lot of, and 2 insights? That's it? 2 of any identical insights? Again, that's not difficult to get. Even the ones that are 2 majors. I mean, you know, 2 majors and a bright idea. A bright idea, really? That's a major cost? No. And 2 major insights? Again, you might argue, well, hang on, don't the normal dreams do that? Yeah, that's the thing. The normal dreams have costs like these, but they don't give you such ridiculous powerful effects as auto-curing a client and triggering your reputation track. These are too much. It's like, as soon as one of these gets thrown out, they are just instant picks. Everybody grabs them and they're just too powerful, particularly if your reputation track is quite high. It's easy to throw in. I mean, literally, you could just shuffle them in and forget they even exist, but yeah, they're just a bit too unbalanced for me.
Your mother.
Next up, we have the mirror clients. Mirror clients are basically a collection of 5 clients that are double-sided, and each one is used as a difference to the starting clients you normally get. Because normally you draft a bunch of routine clients and you shove them out and that's all good. Here, you no longer get location tags on them, but what you get is basically a fat number of points and a starting ability that you can have that is based off the reputation track. So that every time you trigger the reputation track, you get some additional bonus, like in this case, a heart-shaped container, a notebook tile, an elevate and a transfer, move through 3 spaces, an insight, you know, a chance to play a card, to draw a card, a bright idea, that kind of thing. And these are basically used instead of your starting ones, and they differentiate the colors a little bit more than just simply the 4 that are in the game. Although there is a 5th one, which I suspect is for it's for Freud himself, so you could technically be using this character instead of one of these 4. It's kind of weird. But this is actually a pretty cool little module, because just having a random routine client, you know, uses up some of the main deck, and that's kind of it. I like the idea that you can now have something that makes the reputation track that just a little bit better, because some people think the reputation track is a weak part of the game, like it's not lucrative enough. Now, I have won using the reputation track before, so I can dispute that to an extent. But I think if you were to throw this little mini module in and say that you start with something that is based entirely off the reputation track, it might just make it a little bit more powerful for people. Easy to include, not a bad little module at all. I might even start using this on a very regular basis without even telling people that it's a mini expansion module, because I just think it's a nice, easy one to do. You don't have to touch the main routine client deck. You can just let it do its thing. It's pretty neat, and I think I'll use it quite often.
Okay, that's a start. That's very earth-friendly.
Next up, we got bric-a-brac notebook tiles. I'm not entirely sure what bric-a-brac actually means, but essentially this is another starting notebook tile that you put into your board next door to your previous ones. Let's take one of the madness ones here for illustration. Let's say this is the one that I started the game with. Whichever one you decide to pick essentially goes, you know, to the right of it. And the idea is that when you complete your second column, you flip over the token, gain the bonus on it, and then it basically just clogs up the space and doesn't do anything. That's literally all the expansion does. why was this a thing? It's completely unnecessary. You know, I mean, yeah, it's cool to get a big bonus, although the ability to get some insights in 2 heart-shaped containers might be a bit better than getting 6 coffee, or, you know, being able to, you know, get a couple more cards. I don't know, it really depends on what you're doing, but yeah, this just feels unnecessary. I mean, at some point in the drawing room, somebody thought, you know, how many more ways can we tweak this game? All right, yeah, let's throw in this tiny little thing. I know it's super tiny and not worth really getting worked up about, but a lot of these little mini expansions kind of feel like that. It's like we didn't need all these extra bits that have literally just been thought up on the spot. You know, you didn't need these little bits. So yeah, the expansion functions. It's there. It doesn't make the game any more or less enjoyable, frankly. I mean, if anything, it makes it a little bit easier to get the points from filling up your notebook, because now you have a second space taken up with these from the get-go, whereas normally you only have one. So you remove that kind of challenge, to be honest. So yeah, I just wouldn't really bother with these. They're just not needed.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
4 out of 5, now we have the scholarly research cards. You simply shuffle them into the main game, and they basically are dual volumes. So, you know, what they do, they vary. So most of the time they allow you to play more cards. So you can basically spam a bunch of these research cards if you're, you know, play your cards right. And then there's a few that are double volumes. So they actually count as 2 green books or 2 red books, that kind of thing. And the idea is that if you use one of those to immediately publish a journal, a treatise, basically, which is one of the effects on the cards, then you have to use these as the 2, like, you know, first playing books. And it's like, okay, fine, but I'm not sure I like the idea that a lot of these enable you to play more cards easier, because you're meant to use action economy in order to play the cards, and again, this one makes it a little bit too easy to spam the extra cards. Although there are only 12 of them, they're in a deck that's reasonably big, so you're not going to see a ton of them during the game, so they are an easy include, but yeah, I would have probably just not bothered with the whole double volume thing, and just had, you know, I mean, this didn't even need to be an expansion, really, because, I mean, you've got, this is the double volume ones, right? 1, 2, 3. There you go. There's 3 cards that require another rule explanation in order to utilize correctly. The rest of these are literally just scholarly cards. They're research cards. That's it. With the effects that allow you to do a journal or play more cards. Why not just include these in the base game and forego these 3? This didn't even need to be an expansion. It didn't even feel like an expansion. I mean, you know, I'm in 2 minds as to whether I leave these out permanently or just shuffle them into the base game and don't even worry about it. You know, it's not going to dilute the deck. It's got an equal amount of symbols across the board, so there's an even amount of distribution for these. So why don't I just simply throw these into the deck and not worry about it? It just doesn't even feel like an expansion. Why is it included as another mini expansion when all it is basically effectively 3 cards with an extra rule? I'm not a big lover of this one. This one just feels like wholly unnecessary.
What the hell was that?
And then finally we come to Rendezvous Objectives. Now this one is actually an interesting expansion, actually, because this one basically gives you public goals that you can go for, which you've seen in every single game. But there's a couple of little knock-on effects with this one. It doesn't look like much, there's only 6 of them, but what you effectively do is that you layer one on top of another card. So the requirement is always the same. You need to have a spare idea, and you need to have yourself where Freud is. That's always the first bit. But then you essentially have a bonus on one side and the requirement on the other. So let's take an easy one for now. I rendezvous with Freud, and I have 3 major insights in my dial. Okay, cool. And then when that happens, I put one of my ideas on the card and I trigger the effect, which in this case is draw 2 cards and play 2 cards. And you can create some, you know, various combinations with this. So even though there's only 6 cards, there's more than 6 combinations here. But your idea stays on the card permanently, so you don't have that for the rest of the game. You're reducing the number of workers you have. Although, to be honest, I don't usually need all 6 workers to be able to do stuff, especially when bright ideas are a thing. But sucking up one of these when you're early in the game or something can still, you know, make you recall a little bit more often than not. But this one I don't mind throwing in if people are more familiar with the game. You know, the bonuses on here are not crazy powerful. I mean, you get to trigger a bunch of notebook tiles, play some cards, move your ink pot a couple of spaces, trigger the reputation marker a couple of times, get a ton of coffee, trigger locations. I mean, they're powerful effects, but everybody gets a chance to do them once, and there's 3 of them out. So, you know, you've got effectively 3 different cool bonuses that you can get based on 3 criteria, but if you do more of them, you're going to lose more ideas from your stash and have to work with what you've got. So this one I actually kind of like. I almost feel like this one probably should have just been in the base game, but alongside the mirror clients, this is probably, I'd say, the second best little module in this setup, you know, so I will throw this one in every now and again, possibly even for new players, because with a new player, all you got to do is say it's a public goal. People understand what a public goal is. You've got to be where Freud is. Straightforward, easy, you just got to go to his location, and it gives people an objective. They don't score you points in this, but being able to do these cool effects will allow you to do cool stuff, and typically it makes the location, like the map element, a little bit more interesting as well, because I said that the map was probably the weaker element of the game, but with this, now you have a reason to move more often on the map, particularly to where Freud is, like chasing him down, particularly when you want to trigger one of these bonuses. So this is pretty neat. One to throw in probably 80% of your games, I would throw this one in.
Hooray!
So that's all the modules in free associations. You get a little rule sheet to explain them all, and they are basically just a side box. Now, I don't know if this is coming out to retail like after the fact. I suspect it will, but at the moment it was mainly in the Kickstarter. A lot of this does feel unnecessary. Like, they could have easily just thrown this in as base game modules. The Illusion Dream cards are far too powerful. Not a fan of those. The Bric-a-Brac notebook tiles are so inconsequential, and they sort of cheapen the need to fill up all your rows and columns and that I find them just unnecessary and I won't use them. The scholarly research cards, the double volumes just aren't necessary, and the rest of them you might as well just shuffle with the base game cards anyway. It doesn't feel like an expansion. So the only two that I would really give any props to are the mirror clients, which I think are definitely worth considering, and these like new objectives. So overall, the box itself, again, is probably a 5 out of 10, you know, a lot of, 5 out of 10, and that's mainly because of these two modules being actually half decent. But, you know, one I would throw into, you know, these ones I could actually consider throwing these two in with new players, and the other three just seem like a waste of space, but, you know, that's the way I go. So with all of these modules, like, sort of mentioned about, I mean, you get a couple of modules in the base set, but I'm not talking about those because they're in the base set and they're not particularly amazing anyway. But, you know, you have got here a Nightmares expansion and a free associations module thing. So there's a lot of little individual modules for this game to customize it. And honestly, publishers, stop doing this. You need to make an expansion fine. Make it a while after the base game has settled. Let us enjoy the base game for a bit, and then when you get feedback about the base game, then you can start thinking about an expansion, because the best expansions are made based on customer feedback. You know, there are times where we've, you know, said like, oh, this element in the base game is a bit annoying, or this one could be streamlined a bit more, or this one needs fixing. And the best expansions take that feedback and say, you know what, we've addressed this, and we've revised this element, or we've brought in new cards, or put in a board overlay, or something to fix that element. They are the best expansions. An expansion when the game is released, you know, or before it's even play tested fully, do very rarely work. They very rarely work, you know, to get it right. They're too much too soon. They haven't had the full play testing. They haven't been, you know, fully played to see, oh yeah, does this really improve the game a lot? And most people are not going to use these modules until God knows when down the line anyway. And this is a complex game that chances are you're not going to play with the same group of people all the time. You know, I mean, if you do, then fine, you can try out a few of these. But if you're teaching new players, most of this stuff I wouldn't even want to touch with a barge pole, because it's just adding more complication to them when you don't need to. And having lots of little modules dotted around the insert in various places just makes setup and pack away more of a chore, because you've got to separate out all the individual bits. So these expansions effectively are a 5 out of 10, you know, overall. I gave it a 5 for Nightmares, a 5 for free associations. They exist. Some of them have got little neat bits. You could use the pets module to make life a little bit easier. You could certainly use the mirror clients. I think the mirror clients are good if you think the reputation track is not good enough. And these objectives add a nice little cool element to the map thing. You know, these are bits in the base game that people have commented are slightly weaker than other aspects. So these expansions help to make the weaker elements better. Don't just try to pile stuff on top of everything. you know, in order to make it sell. You know, you can have a really nice cake and it's got loads of layers, it's got chocolate, you know, it's got cream and sprinkles and, you know, lovely moist cake, whatever, and it's like perfect the way it is. And then somebody comes along and just goes, well, what if I shove like Smarties on it? And yeah, you've got chocolate trunks and brownie bits and, you know, whipped cream all over the top, and let's just shove all this other stuff on top. Before you know it, this cake is ruined or made worse because you've just piled on everything in the kitchen sink onto it when it was already a nice cake to eat. It's a weird analogy, but maybe I'm just a bit peckish. But yeah, 5 out of 10 for these expansions. They exist, there's some bits in it, but they are wholly not needed. They are definitely not essential, and I don't recommend that you go out of your way to pay stupid amounts of money to get them, you know, for just a tiny little bits extra. But if you've already got the all-in pledge and you've already got this stuff and you're thinking, well, which bits should I focus on? I've already told you which ones they are. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek. Don't forget to check out the actual review for Unconscious Mind. Why am I pointing over there? It's in the distance. But yeah, for the actual base game that I've reviewed, a big, long review. So I think I have comprehensively covered this game now, much to the request of other people. And obviously check out the rest of my Essen content. Let me know your thoughts. Do any of these modules sound good to you? Have you had different experiences with these modules than I have? I'd certainly be interested to know. So until next time, take care, and remember, regardless of whether you are banning any cards from your game because they are far too scary, seriously people, can we stop putting spiders in games, most common phobia and all that? It's still only a game, so bye for now.